get free vouchers.
Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to News 9. You're watching Global Lens with me, Kabir, Naqvi, from our studios here in the National Capital Region. And like always, a power-packed show that's lined up for you. A new era in Syria, for whatever reason and however they got there. But what next for Syria is something that we are going to decode with our esteemed set of panelists and, of course, those spot-on ground reports from Syria as well. But that's not all. We're going to talk about how Donald Trump has spilled the tea over his meeting with the global leaders. And, of course, climate continues to be a commitment here at News 9. We'll tell you why 2024 is all set to be the hottest year. 2025, maybe even warmer. Before that, the top international headlines on your screens first. After Bashar al-Assad's ouster, the UN Security Council is all set to hold a closed-door talk on the situation in Syria. Russia grants asylum to Bashar al-Assad and family, calls for UN-mediated talks as the Islamist Fighters take over Syria. India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri held a delegation-level talk with Bangladeshi counterpart in Dhaka, says that he's conveyed India's concerns over the attacks on minorities, especially Hindus. Ousted Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, calls the interim Yunus regime in Bangladesh a fascist government, says Mohammad Yunus was the mastermind of anti-government protests that led to her ouster back in August. In South Korea, President Yoon has been banned from leaving the country as opposition politicians accuse his party of staging a second coup by refusing to impeach him. Meanwhile, US President-elect Donald Trump calls for immediate ceasefire in Ukraine after meeting Zelensky in Paris. The climate crisis deepens as the year 2024 is said to be the hottest year on record, exceeding the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold. Ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost to that monumental shift that we've been seeing over the last 3 to 4 days in Syria. And of course, as the Assad regime crumbles in Syria after 13 years of devastating civil war, 24 years of Bashar al-Assad, about 29 for his father Hafiz, all in all 53-year-long rule that was ended in a swift move by the Islamist fighters, and over 5 decades of iron-fisted rule of the Assad family came to an end. Now, Islamist fighters, they have seized the capital, Damascus, and President Bashar al-Assad has reportedly fled to Russia, where it seems to be he's the Putin man. He has been granted political asylum. Streets in Damascus, meanwhile, are cautiously coming back to life, though shops remain shuttered and the fighters now roam freely in the whereabouts of the city. Ahmed al-Shara, the leader of the rebel alliance, is meeting with former Assad officials to pave the way for a transitional government. A glimmer of hope emerges from Syrians as plans are underway to reopen banks, restore services, and begin the daunting task of rebuilding a shattered nation. But this is not just about Syria. It's a game changer for the region. Bashar al-Assad's fall has dealt a massive blow to Iran and Russia, who lose a key ally in the West Asian region. Meanwhile, countries like Turkey and Israel are seizing this moment to the best of their ability to bolster their influence in Syria. Israel continues to strike strategic sites across Syria, determined to neutralize heavy weapons that were left behind, whilst the United States has ramped up operations against a possible ISIS resurgence. Earlier, the United States Central Command had put out exactly the targets that it had hit, and Israeli forces and the Israeli Defense Forces have also made about 12-kilometer inroads on the other side of the buffer zone near the Golan Heights. And then there's the human story, because families reuniting as political prisoners are being freed, refugees finally daring to dream of returning back home, and ordinary Syrians hoping to rebuild their lives after more than a decade of heartbreak. Yet, challenges remain. The HTS, the rebel alliance, leading the charge, is still labeled a terrorist group by the United Nations, and the road to international recognition and rebuilding trust is going to be a steep one. So, what lies ahead for Syria, and how will this seismic shift ripple across an already fragile West Asia? We're tracking the story and its global impact as well. Joining me here on the broadcast is Ambassador Ashok Sajjanar, former Indian diplomat. A very warm welcome to you, Ambassador. Ambassador, before I come to you for the first question, here's a complete report in terms of what has happened in the last 24 hours for the betterment of all the viewers that are joining us.
Gunshots rang out in celebration across Syria's capital on Sunday as rebel forces declared they had seized control of Damascus and thrown out President Bashar al-Assad. That spells an end to the Assad family's iron-fisted rule and comes after more than 13 years of civil war in a seismic moment for the Middle East. After mounting a sudden advance a week ago, the rebels on Sunday announced on state TV that they had toppled the president, calling him a tyrant. The Syrian rebel coalition said in a statement it was working to complete the transfer of power to a transitional governing body with full executive powers. It added that, quote, "The Great Syrian Revolution has moved from the stage of struggle to overthrow the Assad regime to the struggle to build a Syria together that befits the sacrifices of its people." Assad, who had crushed all forms of dissent, flew out of Damascus for an unknown destination earlier on Sunday, according to army sources. Russia's foreign ministry later said in a statement Assad had left the country after giving orders for a peaceful handover of power. As people celebrated the government's collapse in cities such as Aleppo, Syrian Prime Minister Mohammad Ghazi al-Jalali said he had been in contact with rebel commander Abu Muhammad al-Golani to discuss managing the transitional period. That marks a notable development in efforts to shape Syria's political future. The Prime Minister also called for free elections so Syrians can choose the leaders they want. But that would require a smooth transition in a country with complex competing interests, from Islamists to groups linked to the United States, Russia and Turkey. Assad's ouster is a major blow to the influence of Russia and Iran in the region. They were key allies who propped him up in the long-running conflict's critical moments. The pace of events has stunned Arab capitals and raised fears of a new wave of regional instability. It marks a turning point for Syria, shattered by years of war that has killed hundreds of thousands of people. It has also forced millions abroad as refugees, many of them seen cheering on Sunday on the streets of their adopted homes from Lebanon to Germany. Western governments have long shunned the Assad-led state, but now they have to decide how to deal with a new administration that looks set to be influenced by a group globally labeled as terrorists. Led by the commander Golani, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, is Syria's strongest rebel group. It used to be an al-Qaeda affiliate, and some Syrians are worried that it will impose draconian Islamist rule.
Well, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanar, former Indian diplomat, continues to be with us. Many thanks for patiently waiting with us, Ambassador. Ambassador, first and foremost, I'm not going to begin by asking you this question about who is actually going to govern Syria, but I want to ask, how is this severed Syria now going to be governed? Because I remember speaking to you when North Korean troops had moved into Russia. We were talking about how before Donald Trump, everybody's putting in that last gasp effort of making sure they have enough in their grasp as well. And the second time I spoke to you was, when the Hezbollah-Lebanon ceasefire, ended up happening. People are actually making those last-ditch efforts before Donald Trump actually takes the Oval Office. But to my question again, not who, but how will Syria be governed now?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kabir. First of all, I compliment you on your excellent memory, because you seem to remember everything that we have discussed in the past. But, the question that you ask is as difficult as, who's going to do it, how are they going to do it? I think that's $1 million question, because it is a very fractured country, it's a very fractured society. It's a very multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious country. You have Shias, you have Sunnis, you have Druze, you have Alawites, you have so many people. So there are so many differences in that particular country. In addition to that, you have interests of such a large number of countries, such a large number of players, not necessarily only regional players, but global players. You have Turkey, of course, in the north, you have Israel in the south, you have Russia also, which has huge interest in Latakia and in Tartus, the naval and the air bases that it has. Iran has a huge interest and has a huge presence there also in terms of going through seeking access, connectivity access to the Hezbollah in Lebanon and to Hamas. And of course, the Kurds are there, the Americans are there, the extra regional actors, players. So, it is going to be extremely difficult for this HTS, which has come, from, the north and occupied, first it occupied Aleppo and then it occupied Homs and Hama and then has come to Damascus. But, to get the whole country under one authority, under one rule, it is going to be extremely difficult. And we've seen that, Turkey has started moving in from the north, Israel has started moving in from the south. They are creating their own buffer zones. They are creating, occupying territory so that their own security is guaranteed. That is not affected in any adverse manner, in any significant adverse manner. So I think it's going to be extremely difficult. The next few days or weeks, if not more, are going to be very important to see how the dice play out on the game board. Kabir.
Ambassador, you've really hit the nail on the head when you've made those pertinent points. But people are also looking at this in terms of a US versus Russia fight as well. And when you're looking at it from that particular prism, it seems like Russia has clearly lost this particular battle.
Yeah, you're right. I would say that, Russia has lost the battle because, Russia was the one which came in 2015, if you remember, when Al-Qaeda had launched its attack on Syria, on Bashar al-Assad, and it was making, some very impressive victories in 2014. And you would recall that it was around that time, next year in 2015, when Putin had gone to the UN General Assembly and he had announced very grandiosely that, Russia is going to enter into the Syrian conflict. And it was not known as to in what manner they would be able to do it. But I think they came in with full air power and they were able to stabilize the country from 2015 till 2019. It took them about 4 years or so. And I think after 2020, we've had some sort of minimal respite. Of course, after 2020, we've seen the COVID pandemic also, which really, brought all this fighting and other conflict onto the back burner. But we've seen after 22, Russia has got involved in Ukraine, and it has lost men, it has lost soldiers, it has lost equipment, it has lost armors. So, it has, although it's said that it is going to, there were reports that it's going to come in a big way. It did launch some few air sorties also, but obviously they have been very ineffective. So I think both the powers that were standing behind Bashar al-Assad, that is Russia and Iran, and even Iran, there were reports that 30,000 fighters are going to come from Lebanon and to the assistance of Bashar al-Assad, but nothing materialized. And I think in addition to Russia, it is Iran which is the biggest loser. Russia is still maintaining its control over Latakia and Tartus. They are behind some hills, so it is difficult for even the rebels to go and occupy them, and maybe they don't want to take on the Russians directly. But Russians are still maintaining their bases on the Mediterranean. But I think as far as Iran is concerned, that has lost big time, because Hezbollah has been decimated by Israel. Hamas has been completely vanquished. And Iran also, it has threatened that it's going to launch attacks against Israel, but it has really not been able to do anything. It's not in a position to take on Israel directly, frontally.
There's a lot of face saving that Iran needs to do. You're right, Ambassador, because several of those IDF-led attacks also happened in Iran. I remember one with, of course, Sinwar being attacked inside Iran. I mean, those are some drone attacks that are taking place inside Iran, Hezbollah and Hamas, like you rightly pointed out as well. But then again, Bashar al-Assad, many were saying, where has he gone to? Is he even going to go to Russia or not? There was a flight trajectory path that had come in right, in the morning over the weekend on Sunday, I think, when you could see the flight move opposite to Russia, and suddenly it took a U-turn, started going back towards Russia, and then it completely went off the radar. Now, the Russian TV and the local channels over there, they were the first ones to confirm that Syria's Assad and his family are in fact in Moscow. He's a Putin person. He's been granted political asylum. We'll talk more about this, Ambassador. Do stay on with us. Let's quickly listen in and take a look at this report.
Syria's former president Bashar al-Assad has fled to Moscow with his family after Russia granted them asylum on humanitarian grounds. Russian news agencies confirmed his arrival to the capital on Sunday after speaking to a Kremlin source. The source added that a deal had been done with Syrian opposition leaders to ensure the safety of Russian military bases in Syria, including Russia's only repair and replenishment hub on the Mediterranean Sea. However, some Russian war bloggers said the situation around the bases was extremely tense, and the source did not say how long the security guarantee lasted. It all began hours earlier on Sunday when rebel fighters raced into Damascus unopposed, ending nearly 6 decades of the Assad family's iron-fisted rule after a lightning advance that reversed the course of a 13-year civil war that has killed hundreds of thousands and displaced millions. The fall of Assad's government is a major blow to the influence of Russia and Iran in the region and marks one of the biggest turning points in the Middle East for generations. Top rebel commander Abu Muhammad al-Golani spoke to a large crowd in central Damascus after rebels swept through the city and announced Assad's ouster.
Within 11 days, by God's grace, Syria was liberated from its north to its south and from its east to its west. This is God's support. Thanks to God, we have witnessed with our own eyes how 13 years of suffering are being healed through this great victory.
Russia's foreign ministry said Sunday that Assad had left the country after giving orders for a peaceful handover of power. Russia's ambassador to international organizations in Vienna, Mikhail Ulyanov, later said on his Telegram channel that Moscow had given asylum to Assad and his family. Jubilant supporters of the revolt crowded Syrian embassies around the world. Assad's fall could allow millions of refugees scattered for more than a decade in camps across Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan to finally return home. But many questions about Syria's future remain. When the celebrations fade, the country's new leaders face the daunting task of trying to deliver stability to a diverse country that will need billions of dollars in aid.
Well, take a look at this. Ambassador, very quickly, coming to you next. One also needs to understand what after Bashar al-Assad. Now, you've got the Alawites, you've got the Shiites, you've got Sunnis. This is largely a Sunni country, and you've got deaths and bloodshed on both sides of the divide. Needless to say, several other communities that are in the play as well. You've got a massive Kurdistan towards, the eastern portion, the northeastern Syria, if, I could put it that way. In terms of this severed Syria, can it now be united again?
Yeah, very difficult. It's very difficult because, all of them, there are rebel groups, and there are, of course, as we were talking earlier, there are countries within the region and outside the region who have interest there. And they are not going to go away. For instance, Turkey, it has carved out a place for itself in the northwest of it. As far as Israel is concerned, it has carved out a place next to Lebanon for itself as a buffer zone. They will not allow these to, be taken away so very easily and so very quickly. And as you just heard from the report, the Russians have those bases. They are going to be there. So, there are rebel forces which are active. The Kurds you mentioned about the northeast, and then in the southeast you have the American presence also. There are the Syrian democratic forces in the east. So it has really been parceled out. The whole country has been parceled out for the last 13 years at least. 2011, when the Arab Spring happened and there was this uprising for more democracy, more rights, more reforms, etc., which Bashar al-Assad could have done something. He could have followed the path of reform, but he brought tanks on the streets, and that is where the problem took place, and we had the 2014 uprising and the entry of Russia in a very big way. So it is a very fractured country, and HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they have a small portion in the west, of course a very significant portion, Damascus, the largest city, Aleppo, the second largest, Hama, the fourth largest, etc. So they have these areas of population, but meaning as we've been talking, out of the 23.5 million, about 7 million are displaced, about 6-7 million of them are in other countries, 3 million of them in Turkey. They will be coming back. So, and the economy is in shambles. What used to be, let us say, about $26 billion till about 2010. Today it is, pale shadow of that. It's about $8 billion of economy. So I think the challenges are huge. Unity is there, the interest of the foreign powers is there, economy is there, infrastructure is there. I think the challenges are huge, and HTS is supposed to be an offshoot of the Al-Nusra Front, of the Al-Qaeda. They say that they have reformed themselves, but the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. We'll really have to wait and see. That is exactly what Taliban also said when they came in 2021, that it's a reformed
hit the nail on the head yet again, Ambassador, because people are now saying whether this is going to be another Afghanistan or not. But you made those pertinent points as well. And whenever you hear the word economics, and mind you, with Iran and Russia, you've got China as part of the same axis. Whenever there's any infrastructure building that needs to be happening, wherever there's a position where somebody requires money, lending of money, China's ears constantly stand up. Let me also introduce Dr. Mudassir Qamar, Associate Professor of West Asian Studies at the JNU. My apologies, sir, if I'm mispronouncing your surname over here. You can correct me when we give you the chance. But very quickly, take a look at some of these visuals, right from Istanbul to, Damascus. Celebrations are rife. You've got people, coming back in hordes of cars with the peace and victory signs. European nations are saying this might be a hopeful move, the ouster of Bashar al-Assad. But on the other hand, the dichotomical pictures. A bank is being looted. People are taking out as much money as they can. There is open fire for as far as the ear can hear it. What does this essentially say about the stability or instability in the days to come?
Thank you very much. It seems the situation is very, very fragile at this point, very volatile. Any power transition in this kind of a situation, it is very difficult. And there are multifold challenges. For example, the HTS, which is the main opposition group, even though it has said that it will be looking after all the people of Syria, but Syria has substantial number of minorities. Syria has substantial number of people who were part of the previous government and previous regime. So how far it will actually be able to take care of the needs and the positions of these people will also determine what happens in Syria next. And if you look at another very important point that is to be noted is that in northern Syria, the SDF, which is a Kurdish-led organization, has been in control of the northern Syria for quite some time, and the HTS will have to deal with the SDF and take care of their positions as well, their aspirations as well. So we have to be very careful and watchful as to how it pans out in the next few days and weeks. While these celebrations that are currently going on underline that there is some euphoria among the people in Syria, and among the refugees, Syrian refugees in different parts of the world. But this can prove to be, short-lived in case things go downhill from here. So a lot will depend on the HTS, Mohammad al-Golani, who is the leader of the HTS, and then SDF. And then obviously the regional powers. How does Turkey behave? What does Iran do? And the Gulf countries, how do they react? Israeli positions will also have to be taken into account. And we should not also forget Egypt, which is a very important regional country, which might have to play some role in Syria as well, if we are looking for stability in Syria.
All right, all right. This is why I wanted to base this entire segment. And Ambassador, I want you to, of course, come in here. It had to be on how is Syria now going to be governed next and not who, because this transition of power is going to be the main focus. Like Dr. Mudassir pointed out, there seems to be euphoria, but it will come to an end at certain point in time. Right now, before we move away from this segment, Ambassador, I'm going to have you get the last say. What are some of those immediate priorities that all these international players, even Mr. Golani himself, and of course the Turkish-backed groups, the Kurdish-led forces, US-backed opposition, of course very small in southeast, but it still exists. These all have a lot of important liabilities in this area. When we're looking at the transition of power, what are some of those immediate and important priorities that must be taken care of?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, Kabir, HTS will have to see, because they are occupying the capital and they are the biggest force now. They are the ones who have displaced, who have removed Bashar al-Assad. I think basically focus will be on peace and security, getting quiet, getting stability. Then it will be getting unity, moving out, getting all these different disparate forces which are occupying different parts, and trying to get them on the same, around the same table and on the same page. And then, of course, economy. It cannot be one following the other, that once you have completed action on one, then you go to the other. I think all these will really have to move in parallel simultaneously, but all three of them are very important, because, if you are going to have peace, security, and unity, unless the economy improves, and all this euphoria that you have seen, Kabir, these are people, these are about the 7 million people who have fled, who are staying as refugees in different countries, in Germany, in Belgium, in Greece, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Turkey, etc. They are rejoicing because they think that they'll be able to go back to their own homes and start normal lives. What does normal life mean? There has to be peace, there has to be stability. You've seen, we are talking about the economy, and you see the infrastructure, how it has been destroyed over these 13 years of fighting. So the challenges are huge, absolutely unimaginable, but and it will need the combined force of all these countries. One last comment, if you permit, Kabir, and that is on what you mentioned about that China's ears perk up when they see that there is some building to be done, some infrastructure to be created. But they are not philanthropists. They will come when they see that there is a profit to be made, and they will come only when there is peace and security. They are not going to get their own army and peacekeeping forces to ensure that there is peace. And you've seen what happens in Balochistan, when their Chinese forces, their Chinese workers are coming under attack, then they have very serious problems. And here, of course, things are not, 1/10 as good as what it would be in Balochistan and other parts of Pakistan. So I don't think that they will be coming here also in a hurry. They have been promising that they'll go to Afghanistan, but we have not really heard any significant investment that has gone in. And this country really needs investment also in its infrastructure and in its manufacturing and industry. Kabir.
All right, Ambassador, I think we're going to leave it there. This has been a riveting conversation, and I know we won't come to a conclusion in just a bit. The dust needs to settle down for that as well. But on that note, let me thank my panelists. Ambassador Ashok Sajjanad, many thanks. Always a pleasure to speak with you, sir. And Dr. Mudassir, always a pleasure to have you with us here on News 9 as well. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we were talking about transition of power, and United States, Joe Biden has said that they're going to support Syria to become a sovereign state. Take a look.
At long last, the Assad regime has fallen. This regime brutalized and tortured and killed literally hundreds of thousands of innocent Syrians. The fall of the regime is a fundamental act of justice. It's a moment of historic opportunity for the long-suffering people of Syria to build a better future for their proud country. It's also a moment of risk and uncertainty. As we all turn to the question of what comes next, the United States will work with our partners and the stakeholders in Syria to help them seize an opportunity. For years, the main backers of Assad have been Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia. But over the last week, their support collapsed, all three of them, because all three of them are far weaker today than they were when I took office. We're clear-eyed about the fact that ISIS will try to take advantage of any vacuum to reestablish its capabilities and to create a safe haven. We will not let that happen. In fact, just today, U.S. forces conducted dozens of precision strikes, airstrikes, within Syria, targeting ISIS camps and ISIS operatives.
Well, time for us to slip into a quick commercial breather here. But before we do that, listen in to some important stakeholders here as well. You've got Hossein Akbari, the Foreign Minister of Iran. You've got Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Sir Keir Starmer. We'll see you on the other side of this very quick short break.
There might also be a serious question. Why so quickly? Why did everything change so drastically on the ground? Well, this goes back, in fact, to perhaps the history of the past 15 years, during which the army was engaged in a prolonged war, faced various international pressures, and endured countless crimes committed against it by the Zionist regime. Significant pressures were exerted. Preparations were made on one side, and on the other side, the opposing parties were provided with modern equipment so advanced that even many of the world's developed countries didn't possess it. For this reason, the Syrian government, army, and people decided not to resist heavily in this area. Naturally, when they chose not to resist strongly, their councils and allies cannot play a serious role either. The countries that were essentially involved in this process and supported it during this time had the goal of exerting serious pressure on Bashar al-Assad. Assad's crime was being aligned with the resistance front. This is a historic day in the history of the Middle East. Assad's regime is a central link in Iran's axis of evil. This regime has fallen. This is a direct result of the blows we inflicted on Iran and Hezbollah, the main supporters of the Assad's regime. This created a chain reaction throughout the Middle East. Together with the Minister of Defense and with the full backing of the cabinet, I instructed the IDF yesterday to seize the buffer zone between Israel and Syria and the commanding positions adjacent to it. We will not allow any hostile force to establish itself on our border. At the same time, we are working to establish a policy of good neighborly relations.
I welcome the fact that Assad has gone. The Syrian people had to put up with his brutal regime for far, far too long. We're talking to regional allies. It's very important now that there's a political settlement, a political way forward, and it's very, very important that we emphasise that civilians and minorities must be protected in this process. But very, very pleased that Assad has fallen. Well, it's very early days at the moment. We do need a political solution to this, and that's what we're talking to regional allies about. It is a good thing that Assad is gone, a very good thing for the Syrian people. What we must also ensure as we go through this, the rejection of terrorism and violence, that civilians are protected, minorities are protected, and that can only be through a political process. That's what we're talking to allies in the region about at the moment.
क्या अगर आज अकेले निकल पड़े, कल कारवां लेके चलेंगे। तो क्या अगर छोटे शहर में बड़ा सपना देखा, मिलकर मुमकिन करेंगे। श्री राम फाइनेंस हर इंडियन के साथ खड़ा है, क्योंकि भरोसा है हमें।
जब जुड़ेंगे तभी तो उड़ेंगे।
श्री राम फाइनेंस।
Thank you, Barun Das. I think the entire TV9 team for putting together such a great, fantastic show.
I would like to congratulate TV9 for organizing the first ever News9 Global Summit, and I'm sure it will be a great success.
It's indeed an immense pleasure and honor for me to be present here in this News9 Global Summit.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens here on News9. Shifting our focus to our American segment, where President-elect Donald Trump has called for an immediate ceasefire and negotiations to end the Ukraine war, branding the ongoing conflict as madness. Now, Donald Trump made this appeal on Sunday, just hours after meeting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Paris at the opening of the iconic Notre Dame Cathedral, marking their first face-to-face talks since Donald Trump's election victory. The discussion, hosted by the French President Emmanuel Macron, centered on finding a peaceful resolution to the conflict. And in that statement posted on Truth Social, Donald Trump claimed, and I quote, Zelensky and Ukraine would like to make a deal and stop the madness, adding that Russia's President Vladimir Putin should seize the moment to act. Now, Donald Trump also hinted at a possible role for China in brokering peace, saying the world is waiting. Now, Zelensky, however, cautioned that peace requires more than signatures just on paper, stressing the need for reliable guarantees. He's reiterated that Ukraine cannot accept a ceasefire without addressing Russia's occupation of its territory, warning that such arrangements could collapse at any given time. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has expressed conditional openness for these talks. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that negotiations must align with the agreements discussed in Istanbul last year and reflect current realities on the battlefield. Russia's demands include Ukraine's neutrality and Moscow retaining control of the 4 partially occupied Ukrainian regions. As tensions persist, the world watches closely to see if Donald Trump's ambitious diplomacy can break the deadlock in one of the most devastating conflicts of our time. Meanwhile, a controversial pledge from President-elect Donald Trump is making headlines. In an NBC News interview, Donald Trump announced he plans to pardon rioters involved in the January 6th Capitol attack on his very first day in office. Here's a complete report. Take a look.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump says he plans to pardon rioters involved in the January 6, 2021 Capitol attack on his first day in office. In an interview with NBC News that aired on Sunday, Trump said he would, quote, be acting very quickly. Trump told NBC that there would be some exceptions to his pardons if the individual had acted, quote, radical or crazy during the election. The attack in 2021 left more than 140 police officers injured and led to several deaths. In what has been billed as America's largest ever criminal investigation, at least 1,572 defendants have been charged in the January 6th attack. Crimes range from unlawfully entering restricted grounds to seditious conspiracy and violent assault. More than 1,251 people have been convicted or pleaded guilty, and 645 have been sentenced to prison, with punishments ranging from a few days to 22 years, according to the Justice Department. Trump described the prosecution of his supporters as corrupt and did not rule out pardoning those who had already pled guilty, including those accused of acting violently. Hopes among January 6 defendants and their supporters for broad-based clemency have been growing over the past week.
Mr. Biden, do you think you can get a fair trial?
It comes after President Joe Biden pardoned his son Hunter, marking a reversal from his pledge not to interfere with his son's criminal cases. Biden said Hunter deserved a pardon because he was the victim of political persecution, an argument Trump will likely use to justify mass pardons. Experts told Reuters they were worried broad amnesty for January 6 defendants would wrongly incentivize the fomenting of unrest or even violence on behalf of a president.
And also, before we move away from the American segment, you've got President-elect Donald Trump again, who has confirmed that he won't seek to replace Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell after taking office in January. And the statement came during an interview aired on Sunday, signaling potential continuity in the Fed's leadership amid ongoing economic challenges.
Donald Trump says he won't try to oust Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. Speaking to NBC News in an interview that aired Sunday, the president-elect said he didn't think the central bank boss would agree to go. Trump campaigned on a promise to lower mortgage rates and other borrowing costs for U.S. households, setting up a possible clash with Powell.
And I will end inflation.
His promise of across-the-board tariffs could also complicate the Fed's bid to curb rising prices.
The American dream, gonna bring it back.
Last month, Powell said he would resist any bid to push him out, arguing that would be against the law.
I'll certainly serve to the end of my chair term.
He was appointed for the job by Trump during his first term as president. However, the relationship between the pair soon soured. In late 2018, Trump privately discussed trying to dismiss Powell, angered by an increase in interest rates. In 2020, at the start of the pandemic, he accused the Fed boss of making bad decisions and argued he had the right to replace him. Such attacks broke decades of political precedent, which held that presidents should refrain from direct attacks on the central bank. The Federal Reserve operates with legal independence, subject to oversight by Congress. Traders currently expected to cut interest rates at a December policy meeting, following data that showed the labor market continuing to cool.
Well, shifting our focus to some top global developments that we do need to touch upon today, because India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, he was in Dhaka, marking the first high-level visit from New Delhi since Sheikh Hasina's ouster back in August. And Vikram Misri met with Foreign Advisor Mohammad Tawheed Hussain and Bangladeshi Foreign Secretary Mohammad Jashimuddin for delegation-level talks. And addressing the media later on, Vikram Misri expressed India's concerns over the recent developments in Bangladesh, particularly the safety and welfare of minorities and attacks on cultural and religious properties. Relations between India and Bangladesh, needless to say, have been strained since the interim government led by Muhammad Yunus came to power. Tensions escalated further after attacks on Hindus and the controversial arrest of Hindu monk Chenmoy Das. And as photos of the two delegations surface, this visit, of course, signals a crucial diplomatic moment amid turbulent times for the two nations. Listen in to some of those reactions after the delegation-level talks.
There has, of course, been contact between our leaderships. The Prime Minister was the first world leader to greet the Chief Advisor on his assumption of office. The two of them had a very cordial telephone conversation thereafter, and the Chief Advisor also accepted the Prime Minister's invitation to speak at the third Voice of the Global South Summit that was held in August this year. Since then, the External Affairs Minister and the Foreign Affairs Advisor have also been in touch. They met each other on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York in September this year. And my visit follows those interactions and is the first Foreign Secretary level structured engagement between the two sides following those developments. Today's discussions have given both of us the opportunity to take stock of our relations, and I appreciate the opportunity today to have had a frank, candid and constructive exchange of views with all my interlocutors. I emphasized that India desires a positive, constructive and mutually beneficial relationship with Bangladesh. We have always seen in the past, and we continue to see in the future, this relationship as a people-centric and people-oriented relationship, one that has the benefit of all the people as its central motivational force. This is reflected on a daily basis in the development projects that have been executed on the ground in Bangladesh and that continue to be developed. It is also reflected in the mutually beneficial engagement we have on a whole set of issues ranging from trade, commerce, connectivity, power, water and energy, and development cooperation, consular cooperation and cultural cooperation.
And take a look at this. An amended lawsuit filed in the federal court in the United States over the weekend alleges that rap mogul Jay-Z raped a 13-year-old girl along with Sean Diddy Combs during a party back in the year 2000. However, Jay-Z denies all the allegations on social media.
Rapper Jay-Z has been identified as the celebrity accused of raping a 13-year-old girl at a New York party in the year 2000, along with Sean Diddy Combs, in an amended lawsuit filed in federal court on Sunday. Jay-Z has denied the allegations on social media, calling the lawsuit a blackmail attempt by the plaintiff's lawyer. Lawyers for Jay-Z did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Combs, currently in jail on federal sex trafficking charges, has also denied the accusations back in October when the Jay-Z complaint was initially filed. The complaint, filed in the Southern District of New York, had previously listed the defendant as Celebrity A and did not name Jay-Z. It claims that the girl was drugged and assaulted by both men at a post-MTV Music Awards party hosted by Combs. Tony Busby, the Texas lawyer representing the alleged victim, told Reuters the lawsuit against Jay-Z, quote, speaks for itself, adding that the case will be fought in court. Busby also said that his law firm had attempted to mediate a settlement, which led to Jay-Z filing a counter-lawsuit accusing Busby and his colleagues of harassment. Busby called that an intimidation tactic meant to silence his client. In a post on social media, the lawyer said his client, quote, never demanded a penny from Jay-Z, adding that she only sought a confidential mediation.
And well, ladies and gentlemen, like we promised, climate is a commitment here on News 9, and according to the European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service, the year 2024 will rank as the world's warmest since the records actually began. That's right. The current extraordinary high temperatures are expected to persist into at least the first few months of the year 2025 as well. And it will also be the first year to exceed the 1.5 degrees Celsius, indicating that breaching the 1.5 degrees Celsius Paris Agreement temperature target is closer than scientists once expected. At the outset of this year, it was predicted that a La Nina would form in the second part of the 2024, which generally has a cooling effect on global temperatures. That La Nina event has not formed, and C3S scientists predict that the near record average global temperatures will continue into the first months of 2025. But the main cause of global warming is the continued burning of oil, coal, and natural gas. Well, time for us to slip into a quick commercial breather here. Top developments right on the other side. Keep watching Global Lens.
India's neighborhood has been in turbulence all throughout.
Sheikh Hasina was forced to resign and take refuge in India.
Myanmar itself is facing an enormous internal crisis of sorts.
Periods of India's greatest strength was when the neighborhood did not have a problem with it.
There are events that are larger than your ability to control them. What you have to do is to make the best of those events and move forward.
This and more. Streaming on News9 plus news is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens. A volcano in the central Philippines erupted for a second time this year, prompting emergency evacuations after it spewed a huge column of ash into the sky. Mount Canal, an active volcano straddling the Southeast Asian country's central provinces, sent an ash cloud up to 4,000 meters into the sky. Take a look at some of those really beautiful visuals, albeit only from afar. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology raised its alert level to 3 on a scale of 5. Level 3 means there is an increased risk of lava flows and the potential for hazardous eruptions within a week's time as well. And like we've been mentioning, climate is a commitment here at News 9. Before we wrap this segment on Global Lens, we leave you with this important piece of a newscast. A historic drought, and this is just last year that we're talking about, and the prospect of course, more in the future because we don't know what climate has in store for us, has spurred the Panama Canal to craft a future plan for a waterway that moves about 14,000 vessels annually between the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. Innovation, meeting up and marrying sustainable development. Take a look at this report. Many thanks for watching.
This unpaved road crosses the rural and self-sustaining Tres Hermanas community in Panama. But these lush valleys, home to dozens of towns, will be submerged if the Panama Canal Authority moves ahead with a plan to build a massive reservoir on the Indio River.
All that you see here, the green trees seen through this area, everything would be lost.
Rodolfo Hernandez is a local resident.
The Indio River community has not yet said yes to them.
The proposal to dam the river over the next 6 years pits the future of thousands of people against the water needs of the powerful Canal Authority. Some don't want to leave. Others are focused on getting fair compensation if they are forced to move, and public opposition could derail the entire project. But with more extreme weather seen over the last decade set to continue, the $1.6 billion proposal seems as necessary as it seems extreme. Tres Hermanas sits here. The state-owned Canal Authority aims to create a vast dam on the Rio Indio to secure extra fresh water. The 50-mile-long artificial waterway connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans relies on fresh water to operate its locks, and, the authority says, provide drinking water. Ricaurte Vasquez is the administrator of the Panama Canal Authority.
And that imposes a relative disadvantage in relation to all other maritime navigation systems in the world.
Why? Because last year was the third driest year in the canal's 110-year history. And meteorologists forecast more severe droughts and faster water evaporation amid hotter temperatures. The waterway is Panama's main source of hard currency revenue and accounts for 3.1% of the country's GDP. It is critical to U.S. imports of vehicle and commercial goods from Asia and for U.S. exports of commodities, including liquefied natural gas. The latest drought forced vessel traffic to be restricted. But the new plan would allow up to 15 extra canal transits a day during the dry season. The authority believes the Rio Indio Reservoir project is the most complete solution to more frequent droughts.
We understand that this is the most important challenge to maintain the canal's sustainability in the long term in the face of demand due to Panama's population growth, which will require fresh drinking water for its consumption. And that leads us to the national conversation of how to tackle this problem.
The project must still pass a long approval process, including a public consultation. But some infrastructure work, including a bridge, is already visible. The Ministry of Public Works has said the bridge is for cars and people to cross the river. Ilia Espino de Marota is the canal's deputy administrator.
Of course, the most complicated part is the process of resettling people. These are conversations that need to be held individually with each family.
To contain the Rio Indio, some 2,260 people would have to be relocated, according to an initial survey by the Canal Authority. 2,000 more would be at least partially impacted. A more accurate census should be completed in January. The project has set aside $400 million, mainly for relocations, but opinions are divided. Some would be willing to sell their land, while others want to fight the project. Dilubino Agraje Dominguez represents the Rio Indio communities through the activist group Countrymen Coordinator for Life.
El campo, la naturaleza, su tranquilidad.
The countryside, nature, their peace for life, for work, is what makes them happy. You can show them beautiful modern things, all well arranged, but it is not the same for the resident who is used to living under his thatched roof, taking his time to go to the mountain and resting at home whichever day he wants.
The shipping industry is apprehensive. The country's Supreme Court recently suspended a controversial mining contract with Canada's First Quantum Minerals after broad public opposition. And instrumental in blocking the contract was Countrymen Coordinator for Life. There is an alternative: to transfer water from an existing reservoir fed by the Bayano River. This plan could be finished sooner, without relocations, and is gaining traction among local communities.
There is a real importance to maintain healthy rivers.
Professor Leroy Poff is an expert on aquatic ecology from the University of Colorado.
I think from an environmental damage point of view, that this dam has many negative impacts and very few positive benefits that couldn't be acquired through this alternative project.
But the Canal Authority discarded the Bayano option 8 years ago over higher costs and its location. And lawyers say it could mean complicated negotiations with the hydroelectric power providers involved. Faced with a changing climate, Deputy Administrator Espino thinks both projects will be needed in the long run. Ahead of the next drought, the canal wants shippers to consolidate cargoes and could deploy water recycling measures if needed. For residents of Tres Hermanas, resource-intense expansion must have a limit.
No estamos en contra del progreso de nuestro país.
We are not against the progress of our country. Our country must progress, but it must be according to what is necessary and not harming its people.
Pueblo.
ये किसान की मजबूरी है इसको जलाना बिल्कुल नहीं चाहता।
सुप्रीम कोर्ट का आदेश का पालन करें, हम कानून के दायरे में रहकर काम करें, लेकिन हमारे लिए तो नहीं कोई कर रहा।
There is no wind in the city to blow it all away. The air cannot rise high enough to disperse, so everything gets trapped. And that's the reason why every winter